one's close relative, so it could be someone murdering their spouse or murdering their child. But in this context, I'm referring to the umbrella term of murdering one's mother or father or both in a double parricide. So it doesn't happen that often, but it does comprise 2% of all homicides, which was greater than I thought it would be. There's a really good talk about forensic psychiatry and parricides, and so of the parricides that results based due to mental illness, we categorize them into psychotic parricides. So usually there's a history of psychosis or beliefs that are not founded in reality. There can be delusions about the victims, and what ends up happening to the victims is due to the mental illness itself rather than any sort of like family dynamic. We compare this to reactive parricides where the murder is not psychotic, and usually there's a hostile relationship, severe family dysfunction, and usually you see adolescents doing this, although adults murder their parents too. So who commits parricides? So typically from a 1999 paper that I think I quote elsewhere, there's usually 3 categories of people that commit parricide. Those experiencing severe abuse at the hands of their parents, those experiencing severe mental illness, and those who are dangerously antisocial and would have committed murder anyway, but the parents are just closest and end up in the line of fire. So typically, parricides are completed by adult middle-class white men that don't have a previous criminal history. And what I find interesting is that among juveniles, so aged 8 to 24, there's a 15-to-1 male-to-female ratio, and among adults, this decreases to 5-to-1. So juvenile parricides, so those committed by people aged 8 to 24, at first the notion was that most parricides committed by children were the result of severe physical or emotional or sexual abuse, but actually only about 15% of parricides committed by youths involved for child abuse, and it's kind of unpredictable. The study talks about using different risk assessments to try to see if this would be predictive of offenses committed by youths, but they really didn't find any correlation showing that these were useful. Ranging in age, I know that there's an 8-year-old that committed a parricide. It's listed on Wikipedia. I couldn't really find a lot more information, but so this is the youngest one that I found. At age 10, Joseph Hall to the right, he shot his father to death while he was sleeping. He was tired of his father physically abusing him and his stepmother. His father was a neo-Nazi, and he was released recently. Colin Griffith. So I was making this PowerPoint over several weeks, and then in the middle of making my PowerPoint, this parricide case had just happened. So in Florida, Colin Griffith, age 17, had a dispute with his mother and then stabbed her, but then told police that she fell on the knife to where it punctured her neck. But I think what's shocking is that less than 2 years before that, he had shot his father to death, and he wasn't charged because he claimed that this was in self-defense. We're not really sure what the motive is, although in 2023, last year, he had previously beaten his mother due to her taking away his video games. And I guess one that hits close to home, Charles Whitman, the Texas Tower sniper. He was 25 years old when he stabbed his mother in the heart, killed his wife, and then sniped 11 people from the Texas Tower. His motive, so he was a veteran and he had been under severe duress. And in the letter that he writes to me, it says, "I've just taken my mother's life. I'm very upset over having done it. However, I feel that if there is a heaven, she is definitely there now." And so I wanted to save her from her suffering. I guess that's sort of. This case, it's really close to home. I think there was a Netflix documentary recently released about Jennifer Pan. So she's Canadian. At 24, she had a history of forging report cards in high school. and tricking her parents into believing that she was doing really well. She faked an acceptance to pharmacy school. And then when they discovered that she was actually dating this guy and not in pharmacy at school at all, they kept her under house arrest. And so she hired some hitmen to kill her parents. So they killed her mother, and her father was in a coma. And when he came out of the coma, he identified her as having organized the hit. So yeah, I guess maintenance of a facade of success. Christopher Porco is kind of a similar situation. At age 23, he mothered his father Peter, and then he tried to murder his mother. And so the motive is kind of similar. He was being chastised by his parents for failing community college courses. He had forged transcripts to get into university. He had forged their signatures on a loan to buy himself a Jeep Wrangler and living expenses. And when they found out, that's when he murdered his father. Sydney Powell, when she was 19, this is kind of a similar story as well. Sydney Powell, she murdered her mother, Brenda, and this had happened like right after they found out that she had failed out of university and was lying about continuing to attend. Her father had been tracking her location and saw that she was at home when she was supposed to be at school, and they talked to her dean at university. Later on, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which I thought was interesting. Chandler Halderson, this is also kind of a similar case actually. Age 23, he shot and dismembered his parents, and the motive for doing so was that they had found out that he had lied about being in college and accepting a job offer from SpaceX. I was curious about the psychology of parricide and many things that happen, like aberrations and developmental milestones that could lead to this sort of reaction. So Heinz Kohut, so he's the father of self-psychology, and his belief was that the parents' failure to empathize with their children and the responses of their children to their personal failures, that emphasizing with them was the root of almost all psychopathology. In terms of family systems theory, things that increase the risk of parricide include family enmeshment, so being like fully, being, I guess, more isolated from other people, family denying the situation, having weapons in the home, and ongoing, usually escalating abuse that can no longer be tolerated and all culminate this sort of reaction. Something I didn't really delve into, so in this PowerPoint, all the parricide cases that I spoke about were of biological children murdering one or both of their parents. I was curious about like adopted children who killed their adoptive parents, but there's really not a lot of information out there about it. But I think it kind of supports that there could be some failure to achieve a secure attachment with the parental figure and poor coping skills. So the cultural fabric. So I chose these cases because I noticed the pattern of young adults trying to maintain a facade of being successful, and then being unable to cope with their parents finding out the reality. I was wondering, like, they all happened in either North America. These all happened in North America, and I was trying to find cases of this that happened in countries where there is like a really high expectation of success. And so, like, why does this not really happen in South Korea or Japan? I think that in North America, there's this tension between individualism and duty, especially in immigrant parents. And something I also noticed here is that in the U.S., there's no like explicit difference in the maximum sentence that you have between homicides and parricides. So, like in Roman times, there's this punishment, poena coli. It's where this has been going on for this happened like really early on. So in 100 BC, the punishment for patricide, specifically killing your father, was treated with death or treason, and so one would be forcibly stuffed into a sack with wild animals.
That's so very Roman.
Something I thought was interesting in South Korea, the minimum penalty of killing your parent is 7 years in prison time, compared to 5 for killing a non-related stranger. And so there were plans to abolish this law, but then I think that caused a lot of backlash because they thought, oh, well, this will kind of erode our tradition of filial piety and parental respect. And so I was trying to find some more about parricides in South Korea, and then I found this one article from the Asian Journal of Criminology about a string of parricides in 1948 to 1963. But in this was I don't really count it as parricides because they were committed by women against their in-laws, but usually in response to escalating verbal abuse. And then there's this landmark case in Japan, Aizawa versus Japan, 1973. So this is a huge deal because until 1995, there was an article in Japanese law stating that patricide was regarded as the equivalent of treason against the state, punishable by death, until a young woman named Aizawa Chiyo. She had been raped by her father over 15 years. She fell pregnant 11 times. She had 5 of his daughters, only 3 survived. She fell in love with a coworker, and her father then placed her under house arrest, and so she strangled him to death. And so, the jury, they felt that it was unfair for her to be punished to death or life in prison because she had been so horrifically abused through her life. So, although she was released after 2 or 3 years in prison in 1978, they actually didn't end this article until 1995. So my takeaways are that, in general, in North America, parricides are typically perpetrated by young white males. Typically, there's a motivation. They're motivated by severe abuse, financial gain, in some cases personality disorders, or the desire to maintain a facade of success. Prevention, we don't really know. So I mean, of course, like early mental health intervention for children, I think is important, but relative to like the amount of homicides out there, I don't know, it's hard to reliably prevent this. But what we do know is that not having children 100% protects against parricide. So here are some interesting links and articles. Parricide.org. Their website is pretty barren still, but I think they're onto something. I think that there's now we know so much. We now know that there's so much that we don't know. So so thank you for being here, and I'll take any questions.
Very good. First question. Who has the first question? Yes.
Hi, Grace. You had a couple of different examples where some were shot to death and some stabbed. Did you have any notion of whether accessibility to weapons were a factor, or did it seem kind of random, or were there more gun households, something like that?
That's a great question. So usually weapons in the home, usually firearms are a huge risk factor for parricides. In these cases that I mentioned, I'm not sure if all of them reliably had guns in the home. I know in the case of the case that happened last Sunday with what's his name, Colin Griffith, because he had shot his father 2 years ago, they had removed all the guns, but then he still used the knife. So I guess and then in the case of Miss Aizawa in Japan, she strangled her father. Japan doesn't really have guns, so I think that I would be inclined to think that households with unrestricted guns would be more susceptible to parricides. I do think that would be the case.
Hi, first of all, wonderful presentation, so interesting. I was wondering, you spoke about the disparity in the statistics of parricide happening in North America and then in Asian countries, I think specifically South Korea and Japan. Are we aware of any sort of privacy law that might prevent from reporting on that could be the difference in statistics? Did you look at any statistics that were just raw data between the two?
That's a really good question. When I was trying to look at statistics for prevalence worldwide, really, I found a lot of information kind of citing the 2 to 3% for North America, but Asia, I don't know. Like, I'm wondering if like you said, maybe privacy laws, or maybe because maybe they do consider it more actively a taboo, and so therefore they suppress it as like a societal protected thing. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point.
Did you look in Europe?
I didn't look at Europe. I should have looked at Europe. I should have looked at a lot of places. But yeah, no, I guess like in general, I was talking to my partner Alan, and you know, like talking about how there was this graph, and it says like serial killers by country, and like US is like here, and everywhere else is like here. So I'm wondering if that's like actually true, or if maybe we're just more transparent. I don't really know.
Being that this is Nerd Night, we really need to know what video games were worth killing your parents over.
Well, yeah, no, if only, if my brother, he had untreated ADHD, so if he had succeeded, it probably would have been Grand Theft Auto Vice City, because that's what got taken away from them back then.
True crime, right? Huge genre in podcasts, Netflix, TV. Do we know if there's any correlation between increased coverage of Parricide in the true crime drama and actual occurrences?
You know, that's a really great question, because like, you know, when I went to the incel talk, they were talking about how true crime and internet forums, so like 4chan and Reddit, by spreading the incel mass murderers manifestos, this actually emboldened a lot more incels, you know, to think, oh, this could be my way, my claim to fame, my rise to glory. When it comes to parricides, it doesn't. I could be wrong. Maybe there's a secret dark web. I hate my parents forum where you know, like they egg each other on. I don't know. I don't doubt it. You know, like I won't lie. Like when I saw the Jennifer Pan story, I was thinking, oh, my parents are lucky. But but no, I bet it does influence it. Although how directly? Maybe not as directly as incel mass murder stories influence other incels. Yeah, I think each case is so different.
Hi. I was wondering, at the risk of maybe sounding like blaming the victim, you know, parents vary. Some of them are better than others, some are more receptive, some are more vengeful. But are there any studies on that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the middle part of your question? Sorry about that.
I said some are more perceptive, some less so, some gentle, some more, you know, like rough and tough, you know, live. So my question is really, do they have any statistics on why maybe a certain family might have this kind of thing aside from obvious mental illness?
Usually, that's a good question as well. I think that in cases where I don't think there's so much data to where like we can like say with certainty this many are due to I guess child's impairment versus this, but I think that I'll have to think about that actually. Yeah. No.
Need more data.
Yeah, I need more data.
All right, well, get to work, people.
It seemed like everyone was middle class or like doing pretty well. Is that it? Do I get the right understanding of people's backgrounds?
So I guess like maybe part of my case selection is I think that definitely there's bias as to which stories end up going viral, and I think that for like middle class or upper middle class cases, I think that I think those have the tendency to go most viral. I know that there's parricide cases that happen in families of lower socioeconomic status, but usually, yeah, no, I think there's definitely a bias, although I can't say with certainty. Yeah, definitely in the cases that I mentioned, like definitely very like middle class, upper middle class sorts of motives, like maintaining the facade of success. But I think that, you know, in other cases, severe abuse, maybe it. I guess like the severe abuse cases, I feel like maybe they make more sense on paper, so they're not as like spectacular when it comes to recording.
That makes sense. All right. Well, that's all for questions. Thank you so much.